been a long
We
time.
have a true legend tonight with us, Dr. B. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on Mastering Diabetes. When I was a kid, before Mastering Diabetes was even created, I dreamed that one day two good-looking gentlemen would invite me onto a live webinar where I could talk about the gut microbiome and fiber and the way that it relates to diabetes and diabetes care. And the amazing thing is dreams do come true.
We like to think of ourselves as enablers. We're here to really make people's dreams come true. And even for you, if that's the case, I'm very happy.
I worked like more than 80 hours a week for the last 20 years for this moment right now.
Oh my gosh, guys.
I tried to keep a straight face. I could only go so long.
Let us know in the chat box where you're coming from in the poll. Let us know what type of diabetes you're living with. We want to know who is here with us. I'm coming from Santa Monica, California. Where are you, Dr. B?
I'm in Charleston, South Carolina, #1 city in the world to visit, according to Condé Nast.
Wow.
Deal with that.
I'm in the #2 country to visit, Costa Rica.
You're in Paris?
So we got a total of 193 people here so far, which is good. We're expecting probably closer to maybe 400 people here today. So over the course of the next 5 to 10 minutes, people will be trickling in. Just so Robbie said, if you just got here, tell us where you're from, put it in the chat box, and then vote on the poll that you see on your screen right there. Go ahead, Dr. B, what are you saying?
I have a stupid, crazy thing that I want to do tonight, live on the webinar.
I'm a little bit nervous right now, but I'm ready.
It's not some of the things that we discussed over text message. We'll keep that private. This is okay. Tell me if I'm being just really, really stupid here. I have 49,735 followers right now. 49,735.
I like where this is going.
I'm wondering if live tonight on this show, we can pull the trigger and have everyone all at once at the end of the show do, even if you unfollow me afterwards, let's do a live Dr. B follow so that I can actually hit 50,000 live on the air on Mastering Diabetes. 50,000.
Let's do this all throughout the webinar. Let's keep reminding people, and I want updates on that number as we progress.
Are we okay? Because what I was thinking was I thought it would be kind of cool if we did a countdown at the end of the show. Now, if you got to leave, just follow me, and you can unfollow me tomorrow if you don't like me.
You just want to get to that 50,000.
But I want to do it live on the air on Mastering Diabetes. How cool would that be to hit the magic number live?
Okay, so when we get to that point, make sure everybody here knows exactly how to find your Instagram profile. What are they going to type into the search box? How are they going to find you?
I'm going to go put a link into the chat box right now so people can get to it with their computer. And then you'll see exactly what to type into your phone if you prefer to do it on your phone. All right, there we go. Gut Health MD, guys. And it's great content. They're not going to unfollow you, Dr. B. Once they get exposed to this information, that's not happening.
And if you don't have Instagram, just download Instagram for the show tonight. And then you can delete the app tomorrow, okay?
All right, so let's take a look at this poll here real quick. We have about 32% of you with type 2 diabetes, 18% with prediabetes. So that's 50% of you have either prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. And then this is actually the biggest contingent of non-diabetic people I've ever seen. 26% of the audience does not have any form of diabetes, and 14% has a loved one with diabetes. So effectively, here's what we're looking at. 50% with prediabetes or type 2, 40% do not have diabetes, and then the other 10% are people with type 1 like Robbie and myself. So this is fascinating. And actually, now that I think about it, it makes perfect sense because we're talking about the gut microbiome. We're going to dispel a lot of myths here. Dr. B is going to drop some serious knowledge. And whether or not you're living with diabetes, this information is important. And even if you're not living with diabetes, the question is, Are you already following his recommendations, or are there some nuggets of wisdom here which are really going to take your overall health to the next level?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly believe, Cyrus, just to play off what you were saying, that it does not matter who you are. It does not matter who you are. You could have diabetes, you could have type 1, type 2, you could not have diabetes at all. We all benefit from taking care of our gut microbiome. We all benefit by doing that. And the reason why is because, as we're going to get into in our show tonight, all health really starts there. All health starts in the gut. It's amazing the way that we have found that the gut microbiome connects to so many critical parts of our body and the way that our body functions. And so if you mess up the gut, you're messing up so many other things. You're messing up the way that your immune system works. You're messing up your metabolism, your hormones, the way that your mind works. And so it really is true. Hippocrates said this, that all health starts in the gut, and it really is the truth. And so no matter who you are, if you care about your health, which we all should, we're human, then you should be taking care of this part of your body. And the beauty is that if you have type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, then I think the things that we're going to talk about tonight are going to benefit you that much more. And I honestly believe that using the program that you guys have in Mastering Diabetes, which, by the way, is fantastic for the gut microbiome, I honestly believe that type 2 diabetes is a completely reversible disease. I truly believe that. And I think it's just a matter of commitment and time, honestly.
That's beautiful. And I just want to add to that. We have Marianne in the chat box saying no diabetes because I reverse type 2. So let's envision a day, Cyrus, where people come to this webinar and it says, we'll call it 80% don't have diabetes because they reversed it. And then maybe the other 20% say they might have type 1 and that's, that's okay.
Maybe we should add a new option that basically says used to have.
Yeah, I like that idea.
That would be really cool.
Okay, so there was one other comment here that I wanted to touch on, which it came from Todd, and he said, I am here to listen to the world's smartest gut health doctor. Look at that, Will. You got followers from all around the planet right now that are just...
Todd, I love you. And when you turn 50 and you need a colonoscopy, come to Charleston. I'll do it for free. Thank you.
He's also a stand-up comedian, folks. He's also a stand-up. All right, so let's get into it here because there's a lot of stuff that we can cover here. We got a total of 280 people in the room so far. We're going to get some more. In front of you right now, ladies and gentlemen, you have Will Bolsewitz, who not only has the most complicated last name in the world, but he is a very smart human. He is a graduate of Georgetown University School of Medicine. He's published more than 20 articles in peer-reviewed scientific journals, and he's quickly making a name for himself through a number of podcast interviews and very high-profile speaking engagements. We were very fortunate to call Will a friend of ours, and the information that he has about the gut microbiome and plant-based nutrition, just like you said, it falls directly in line with the Mastering Diabetes program. That's why we felt it was a perfect fit for doing a partner webinar. So, Will, thanks for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Cyrus. I've never seen such a clear picture of you in my life. I love it.
I'm here to
No, it's awesome. I'm grateful for the opportunity to come and talk to your tribe. Honestly, I think Mastering Diabetes is an amazing community, and that's like a huge part of what it's about. It's not about just education. It's about finding your tribe. It's about finding your people and working together to battle. I mean, honestly, to battle these conditions: type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and all the different varieties that are on the spectrum.
100%. Okay, so let's get into it here. Let's start at the top here. Tell us about your educational background and why you're the smartest doctor on the planet. That's number one. And then also at the same time, talk to us about how you got interested in plant-based nutrition in the first place. Because I'm imagining that you weren't born as a plant-based eater and somehow along the way you got intrigued by it and moved your career in that direction.
No, yeah, I mean that's an interesting part of the whole sort of thing that intertwines with my education, which is that I'm a traditionally trained Western doctor. I worked really, really, really hard to get to where I am, And, that basically included stops at Vanderbilt for undergrad. I went to Georgetown for med school. I went to Northwestern for my medicine residency. So I'm board certified as an internal medicine doctor. I was the chief resident at Northwestern. And then I went to the University of North Carolina, and I did a special fellowship. When I was there, I was actually on a grant from the National Institute of Health. I was training at kind of two things at the same time, training to be a gastroenterologist. That's what I am. That's what I do for a living. And also I was at the School of Public Health, which is one of the top in the country. And basically I was a cancer epidemiologist. And that's what I did. That's why I was publishing papers. And yet all of those academic accomplishments, and I knew literally nothing about nutrition. And frankly, did not even know how to take care of myself. And so here I am, I'm this celebrated doctor. I won the top awards in my residency, the top awards in my fellowship. But I was putting on weight and felt like my health was snowballing out of control, to be honest with you. And it kind of started with bad habits in my childhood. I became the king of fast food in college. I was the guy among a group of guys that everyone was like, gosh, dude, your diet is horrible. And so tons of, Subs, Jersey Mike's, Waffle House, Captain D's. It was like someone literally got shot in the parking lot in some of the places that I ate.
Yeah.
And you can get away with that when you're 18 years old. But then as I was approaching 30 years old, I noticed it was catching up with me. And, I was busier than I'd ever been. I was chief medical resident at Northwestern in Chicago. My job was literally to take out the bigwigs from around the country out for steaks. And my weight started to climb. And, I was a person who in high school, I was 6'4", 190 pounds. And I was 30 years old and I was 235. And I was single and I'm a 30-year-old single guy and would have done anything within my power to make my body look good and try to impress women. Honestly. And so I was working out like an absolute animal. I was in the gym for 30 to 45 minutes most days of the week. And then after I was done lifting, I would go and jump on the treadmill and do anywhere from a 5K to a 10K. Or if it was summertime, I would jump in the pool and swim 50 to 100 laps. And that was multiple times a week I was doing that. Still, I could put on the muscle mass. I could lift heavy amounts of weight. I could not lose the weight. And that's because I was stopping at Hardee's and getting a chili cheese dog and a bacon cheeseburger on my way home from work. Mm-hmm. And so what's interesting is I met my wife, and my wife, I'd never been around anyone who ate the way that she ate in my entire life. Literally, I'd never been around that. And my wife at the time was vegetarian. And I saw the way she ate, and we would go out to these great restaurants and she would get a plant plate. I'd be getting whatever chop or whatever. And she'd be like, can you just put together some plants on a plate for me? And that's what she would get. But the thing that I found to be amazing is that my wife could literally eat whatever she wanted to eat and not gain weight and looked, amazing. So it kind of inspired me a little bit, and I never really told her I was doing this, but behind the scenes, I started to make some changes that initially were minor changes. So rather than stopping at Hardee's and getting the chili cheese dog, I would come home and throw a couple bananas, some greens, some berries, and some nuts into a blender, buzz it up, and I would have a smoothie for dinner and kind of just start from that place. And I felt amazing. I definitely felt the difference, and the difference, it was almost immediate. No sort of hangover after meals. It was enough to get me to start to move on my own in this direction towards plant-based nutrition without really, frankly, knowing anything about plant-based nutrition at that point in my life. And so as I was doing this, I felt so great. I started to look into the science of nutrition myself. And, the cool thing about spending so much time, thousands of hours studying epidemiology and research and publishing papers, is that I don't need someone to interpret the science for me. I look at the studies and I interpret them myself, and I come to my own conclusions about what I see. And what blew me away, by the way, Cyrus, I love that you're just eating food live on the show. I wish I brought some food, man.
I apologize. I haven't eaten in like.
I love it. Oh,
I hope you guys.
What do you got? What do you got?
It's
better not
literally.
be- Huh?
I don't know if you guys can see. It's a bunch of cauliflower with nutritional yeast and black pepper on top of it.
There we go. Plant-based
It's very
nutrition.
simple.
That's how you build an elite athlete right there. So anyway, what was so interesting is it really started from a place of experimentation on myself and feeling fantastic, and then turning to the research, being like, why did I not hear anything about this in med school? Why did I not hear about this during residency or during my fellowship? I'm a gastroenterologist. Like I'm the gut expert. I'm supposed to be the guy who knows about nutrition of all of the specialties that exist in medicine. It's supposed to be me. Why do I not know anything about this? And so I started to read and study, and the more that I read and studied, the more that it became very clear to me, that the key to health, whether it's digestive health or, amazingly, health throughout the entire body, it doesn't even matter what organ system we're talking about. The key to health is plant-based nutrition. And so as I was reading and studying, it just really inspired me, and I kept making more and more changes in my life. And I was seeing changes in my body as I was doing this. I lost about 30 pounds just by essentially eliminating red meat and eliminating white meat and cutting it back to basically I was a pescatarian for several years. And I got to this place where I was weighing about 205 pounds, felt great, but I was like sitting there and I was like, you know what? Like, why don't I just try it and just see what happens? And so I decided to go for it and eliminate eggs, dairy, and fish. And when I did that, I lost another 15 pounds and was back to my weight from high school. So I was back to 6'4", 190 pounds, and felt like at this point in my life, I'm in the second half of my 30s, like I am right now, and felt better, felt more energized than I had felt in like clearly more than 10 years. And honestly, it sounds weird to say this, but I felt like I reversed aging. Like I was, I'm encroaching on 40 years old right now, and I feel like people think that I'm in my 20s. And I get a lot of, are you old enough to be a doctor? And I get way more of that now than I used to get like 5 years ago. So with all of that, I decided to take this into my clinic. And, 5 years ago, I started to work this into my clinic and talk to people about the importance of nutrition for digestive health, and started seeing in my patients equally amazing results in terms of fixing GI illnesses. And so it just really inspired me to the point that 3 years ago, I was like, this is not, I was just kind of like, I had this compulsion, like it wasn't good enough to be in the clinic with my patients one-on-one talking about these things. It wasn't good enough. I needed to take this information that I had learned through in my independent study and like the extra work that I had done. I needed to take that and I needed to share this with people because it's too important. I just truly feel like this can change lives. I truly believe that. And, the reality is when you're a medical doctor, that's the dream. The dream is to help people. That's really what we want to do. And so I took my message to the internet and started my Instagram account. I knew nothing about social media and had no expectations. And so now here we are 3 years later, and like maybe tonight we hit that magic number.
No, we got to talk about this. We got to talk about this. I don't know what's going on with our audience tonight. Guys, if you've just come and you're a little bit late, you might not have heard the announcement. We're trying to increase Dr. B's Instagram following to 50,000. He is at 49.7, and I'm refreshing the page, and I haven't seen it go to 0.8. Like, we need to get going here, guys. So at the very top, there's a link to Gut Health MD on Instagram. If you're not following him already, we gotta adjust that. So we're
moving. Let's go.
All right, let's go.
Nice work, guys.
All right, so Dr. B, your background, your education, it's really extraordinary. But one of the things you're the best at is taking a very complex topic and making it easy to understand. So can you give our listeners an understanding of what the heck is the microbiome and why is it so important?
Yeah, I would love to. So this is stuff that I have to tell you, it's hard for me to believe. And like, I've seen it all. I'm a medical doctor. I've like seen people come back from, basically death. And this science is the most mind-blowing thing that I feel like I've come across. So let me start with this and just say that you're not, like, you, the listener at home, are not as human as you think that you are. The more that you learn about these things, the more that you realize that we right now, like sitting here, are a part of nature's balance. And that is because you have this community of microorganisms that lives inside of you, on top of you, in your mouth, in women inside the vagina. And this community of microorganisms is called your microbiota. So these are invisible things that you would not even know that are there, but there are 39 trillion of them. 39 trillion.
Okay, just for context here, how many human cells do we have in comparison to 39 million? Do you know?
So if you include every single human cell, which would include platelets and you include red blood cells, that would be about 30 trillion human cells. So right off the bat, clear cut, all scientists agree, you are more microbial than you are human, like clear cut.
So you're more than 50% microbial.
More than 50%. And if you actually break it down, Cyrus, and you eliminate things that don't have a nucleus, right? So like we classically think of a cell as having the nucleus and the mitochondria and the Golgi complex and all those parts of the cell that we learned about in biology in college.
Right.
If you were to just look at those cells and eliminate the ones that don't have a nucleus, like the red blood cells, which make up our blood, or the platelets, which help us to form blood clots, if you were to eliminate those things and just look at nucleated cells, then you are more than 90% bacterial. You are less than 10% human, because there's only about 3 trillion of those types of cells. And those are the main cells that we really think about.
Wow. So there's more non-nucleated cells than there are nucleated cells in your body. I did not know that.
Oh, substantially more. There's about 10 times more. There's about 10 times more non-nucleated cells than there are nucleated cells in the body.
That is fascinating.
But either way, when you look at it, we are more microbial than we are human. And it gets actually far crazier when we talk about our genetics, right? So let me take a step back. And by the way, I want to introduce the players of the microbiome in a moment. But first, before we go there, let's rewind back to the Bill Clinton days. And it's 2001. And Bill Clinton calls a major press conference in the Rose Garden. And here he comes, and he's got like Tony Blair with him, and he's got a representation from several major countries from around the world to announce a major healthcare discovery. How often do we see a president actually do this? Like, I can't think of any other time in recent history. This is the type of attention that you would give if you just found the cure for cancer. So Bill Clinton comes out, and he basically has these scientists with him. And the reason why he does this is because they had just, for the first time, cracked the human genetic code. So they felt like because they had cracked the human genetic code, they thought that they had actually figured everything out. They thought once you have this, you have the roadmap to health and disease. And once we have human genetics, we're going to figure it all out. Cancer is going to go away. Heart disease is going to go away. You don't have to worry. You'll live to 150. And the problem is that is just not the truth. It has not worked out that way. Clearly, we still have heart disease. We still have cancer. We still have medical issues. There's many medical issues that are getting worse in our country. I think that we would all agree. And so what's the problem? The problem is that if you're going to look at genetics, you can't ignore your microbes. You can't ignore your microbes. And we have 150 times more genetic data from our microbiome than we have human DNA.
No
Cyrus,
way.
even though you and I, even though you are a much better looking guy than me,
Debatable, but I hear you.
even though I must concede that, you and I are literally 99.99% the same
Identical.
in terms of our human DNA.
Correct.
Now, there is this small 0.01% that makes you look the way that you do. It makes me look the way that I do. I'm not saying that our gut microbiome is the reason why you look the way you do or the way that I do. But that is such a small fraction of our DNA relative to our gut microbiome. And this genetic code is so critically important for so many things. Let's kick it back to diabetes for a minute. Let's talk about diabetes and talk about the fact that different people get a different response from the same drug. Why? Why is that? Why is that I, as a medical doctor, can prescribe literally the exact same thing, and one person is going to come back and say, I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread, and write something super positive about me on the internet, and then another patient is going to have a life-threatening side effect and say, I'm the worst doctor in the history of mankind? Why is that? And the answer is your microbiome. Your microbiome, which is entirely unique, it is entirely personal. It is as unique as your fingerprint. You and I, Cyrus, are 99.99% the same in terms of our human DNA. We may be 0% the same in terms of our microbiome.
So that was actually my next question for you, which is it true that if you took two plant-based eaters, I eat a lot of plants, you eat a lot of plants, is your diet the only thing that really factors into the genetic makeup of your microbiome, or what other variables are going to actually alter yours and my microbiomes?
Your microbiome, speaking to everyone at home right now, your microbiome is an imprint of your lifestyle. The single greatest determinant of your microbiome is going to be your diet. And the reason why is because the vast, vast, vast majority of the microbes that are a part of your microbiome live inside of your colon. The vast majority of them live inside of your colon. And so they get exposed to the food that you eat. They are as living as you and I. They are living creatures. They need energy too. And their energy source is the food that you personally choose to put in your mouth and swallow down. Each one of us eats about 3 pounds of food per day. That's what the average person eats, about 3 pounds of food per day. So in a given year, we're eating about 1,000 pounds of food per year, just to keep the math nice and simple.
You eat about 8 pounds if you're Cyrus, Dr. B. We actually
He's like Michael Phelps.
Previous webinar. Mastering diabetes, you eat more and you weigh less, and we're not kidding around.
He's like Michael Phelps. That's incredible. Well, actually, there is a lot of truth to that. Actually, you bring up a good point, Robbie. That's a non-microbiome issue or comment. But I mean, if you're talking about nutrient density, and you're talking about, plant-based foods. I mean, for example, you can literally eat an entire pound of greens, the most nutrient dense things on the planet. An entire pound of greens is 100 calories, which is like a tablespoon of oil, basically, right? So, anyway, nonetheless, so your diet, this 1,000 pounds of food that you eat per year, this 80,000 pounds of food that you will consume during your lifetime, is the number one driver and influence of the constitution of your gut microbiome. There is a genetic element to this that is inherited that you don't have control over, but we are learning more and more that this genetic element is not as big as people want to make it out to seem, particularly if you compare what we're learning today in 2019 to what we thought maybe 10 years ago. So it used to be that we thought, oh, well, you're born with a certain microbiome and you're going to live with this the rest of your life. Not true. Not true. This is completely malleable. You can change your microbiome. But the rest of your lifestyle matters too, right? So exercise and sleep and stress and time that you spend with other human beings, right? You want to torture a human being. What is the worst torture that you can do to a human being? It's isolation. It's solitary confinement. That is literally torture of a human being. We share microbes. My microbiome is, I guarantee it because the studies support this, my microbiome is similar to my wife and my children because we are in the same household. Sharing a household affects the microbiome of all members because we spend time together. Pets, having pets at home, time that you spend outside. I mean, there's so many different factors that contribute to the constitution of your microbiome. But at the end of the day, the single greatest determinant is the food that you choose to put in your mouth and swallow.
Okay, this is fascinating. Sorry, go ahead, Robbie.
Yeah, I got a quick question. Can you help us understand how we measure the microbiome right now? Like,
how do you measure it?
Yeah, like what tests could be done? Like how would it work?
You mean how do you measure the health and the status of your microbiome?
Yeah, like what's there? Like if let's say we were going to say, yeah, you and your wife and your kids, you have the same microbiome. Like how would you test that?
So you could, let me say this, for fun, out of curiosity, there are some publicly available tests that are not very expensive. So one thing that we're probably going to talk about more is something called the American Gut Project, which is run out of the University of California, San Diego by one of my health heroes, Rob Knight. He is someone that I think is going to win a Nobel Prize someday.
Yep.
And so you, for $89, can submit a stool specimen to the American Gut Project, fill out a survey, and they will tell you what your microbiome looks like and how it compares to other people that are in the American Gut Project. And they have more than 11,000 people who have submitted a stool specimen so far. So that's one of the ways you could do it, AmericanGutProject.org. You can go to Ubiome. Ubiome is one of the ones who, hold on a sec. Did Ubiome, they got in trouble recently, didn't they?
I don't know, man. Google this.
I think they did. Anyway, nonetheless. Okay, so American Gut Project, I like them anyway. So there's ways that you can do this. But I think that the issue, what people need to understand, everyone wants to know, well, Dr. B, run a test. Like, run a test and show me, tell me. Dr. B, I literally saw someone on my Instagram today that was like, I had this test done that told me that these are the foods that I should and should not eat. I hate to tell you this, but that test was a complete waste of your money and only created confusion. That test has never been scientifically validated. Okay, a test that takes a stool specimen and tells you what you should and should not eat does not exist in 2019. It's coming. It will be here. It's not here right now. Save your money. If you want to do a microbiome test at home and you want to do something like the American Gut Project, it's $89. You're not breaking the bank. It's interesting. But I will tell you right now, and Dr. Rob Knight would agree with me when I say this, it is not designed for clinical use. This was not a test developed for the purpose of a doctor taking the data and making inferences about your health using the data from the test. It's fun. It's curious. That's not the way that we do it. So to answer your question, how do I do this, Robbie? Like, how do I do this in my own clinic as a gastroenterologist? The answer to that question is this. Let me start by explaining changes in the microbiome that are associated with disease, because that's what people need to first understand. This community of microorganisms is broken into 5 specific subtypes that live inside of us. They're mostly bacteria. Bacteria are single cellular organisms. We've all heard of bacteria like E. coli. We think they're so bad. The pendulum is swinging the other way right now. We're learning that these bacteria are here to help us. We need them. We cannot survive without them. So bacteria are the dominant players within the microbiome, but there's 4 other categories worth mentioning. One is yeast or fungi. Number 2 are protozoa or parasites. Now, we don't all necessarily have those, but they can exist, and they can be a part of a healthy, balanced microbiome in some cases, even though we may be terrified of them. Number 4 are my personal favorite, which is single cellular organisms called archaea. Archaea are not bacteria. They're not yeast. There's some sort of weird hybrid blend between the two, completely distinct, completely separate. They are the first life that existed on Earth. They found a site in Greenland with soil that is 3.8 billion years old, and they found ancient archaea in that soil. That is predating oxygen on this planet. There was not oxygen, but there were archaea. You can find them in the most challenging of places, the most challenging of environments. You can find them inside of a volcano. You'll find them at the bottom of the ocean, miles deep inside of a rift vent. And for whatever reason, you will find them inside your colon. All right, so archaea are number 4. And then the last are viruses. we actually have a ton of viruses. And when I say 39 trillion microbes, that does not include the virome. The virome is the community of viruses that live inside of us, which estimates are a quadrillion, which is the same as 1,000 trillion, a quadrillion viruses that are a part of the human body. And all of these 5 types live in a harmony or balance. And when there is harmony and balance, and they're there and they're doing their job the way that they're supposed to, and they're interacting with us the way that we evolved to interact with these microorganisms, we have what's called eubiosis. Eubiosis means harmony. And generally what we find is that people who have health have higher numbers of species within their microbiome. They have a higher level of diversity within the microbiome. In the United States, you could have anywhere from 300 up to 1,000 different species of microbes. But here's the thing. Here's where we got to get real for a moment. We in the United States, so I'm saying 300 to 1,000, right? Go and compare that to native tribal people. For example, there is this tribe of hunters-gatherers, really gatherers-hunters, that lives in Tanzania called the Hadza. And they've studied the Hadza. They live an ancient lifestyle. They are not drinking Diet Coke. They don't have an iPhone. And they're living the way we used to always live. And the Hadza have more on the order of 1,500 or 1,600 different species. So right off the bat, the healthiest of American has a significant drop in the diversity of their gut microbiome. And this is concerning because when we study the gut microbiome, what we found is that it's the loss of diversity which shows up when we develop disease. For example, in obesity or in type 2 diabetes, it is the loss of diversity that is associated in the microbiome with the manifestation of disease. And so we already have lost a significant number of species. And when we do this, when we lose species, when we have the inadequate diversity, when we have a loss of balance within the microbiome, less good guys, more bad guys, when we see this happen, this loss of balance and this loss of diversity, there's a term that we use, and that is dysbiosis. And dysbiosis is what, to get back to the original question, what do I as a GI doctor look for in my clinic? I'm looking for signs that my patient may have dysbiosis. And because I'm a gastroenterologist, the flat out answer is most of my patients have dysbiosis because the conditions that I treat, irritable bowel syndrome, acid reflux, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, constipation, diarrhea, chronic diarrhea, go down the line. These are conditions that are uniformly associated with damage to the gut microbiome and dysbiosis. But I also look for other clues. Do I see evidence of autoimmune disease, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, Hashimoto's thyroid? Do I see evidence of migraine headaches, depression, anxiety, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's? I could keep going. We could go all night talking about the hundreds of conditions that are now associated with alteration or damage to the gut microbiome, with the term being dysbiosis. But I think the point from my perspective is I don't need a test to tell me that my patient who has irritable bowel syndrome, migraine headaches, and hypothyroid has damage to their gut microbiome. It's obvious.
Okay, Will, this is fascinating. As you were talking, I was just like, wow, I have maybe 40 follow-up questions for you. I'll give you one right now.
I'll stay here all night. I'll skip it tomorrow. I'll skip work. Let's do it.
Let's have a marathon webinar, 12 hours long. Okay. In the world, if you go onto the internet right now and you type in the word microbiome or dysbiosis, most people get bombarded by a whole bunch of differing views and conflicting opinions about what's the right way to treat dysbiosis. From the paleo world, from the low carbohydrate world, you hear things about consume bone broth because it's full of collagen. And by doing so, you can not only repair the lining of your large intestine, but you can also increase its ability to produce butyrate, a short-chain fatty acid, which has a number of miracle-like activities. But then you go to the plant-based world, and people in the plant-based world say, oh, well, you want to eat more fiber-rich foods because fiber is actually a food for the bacteria in your large intestine. Even though you can't metabolize it as a human being, the bacteria produce cellulase. They can break down cellulose and use it as a fuel and produce those same short-chain fatty acids. So my question to you is this. Patient presents to you, they have dysbiosis. You found out that they have a reduced microbiome diversity. They maybe don't have any history of autoimmune disease, but have been sort of eating a nutrient poor diet, standard American diet, greasy, fatty foods, you name it. Maybe they're a little bit overweight. How could you go into a little bit of detail here about what's the right protocol to follow in order to regain that microbiome diversity? Is bone broth helpful? Is things like, what's the other thing I'm thinking of? Collagen, medium chain, MCTs, medium chain triglycerides, like all these products are marketed to people. Are they effective? Are they not effective? What advice and what should people know in order to actually recover their microbiome most optimally?
Right. Well, what I would say to start is this. Science is what I believe in. I have dedicated my career to the pursuit of science, the belief that science is our compass that allows us to understand the rules of the world and how things work. That there are rules, that there's a certain way that things work, right? I throw an apple in the air and everyone knows what's going to happen with that apple. It's entirely reproducible. And that's the way that the world turns. And science is our window into that. There's only one person who knows these rules right now definitively, and that's God. And the rest of us are just trying to use our tools, which are scientific tools, to interpret and understand better. And without that, we know nothing, right? If we don't have science, we have nothing. We have no understanding. Even if you draw an inference of, oh, I've seen this happen 100 times in a row and it's entirely reproducible, you just used science to draw a deduction. So the point from my perspective is we have to let the science do the talking. And you guys know that I am a plant-based gastroenterologist, but I am not a plant-based I'm just going to say this. It's the truth. I'm not a plant-based gastroenterologist because I'm trying to fix the environment or because of animal welfare. Do I care about those things? The more that I have become a plant-based gastroenterologist and studied those things, the more that I do care about those things. I do think that it's important. And I think that every single person should study that and learn on their own. That's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm a medical doctor. I'm here to talk about health. I'm here to talk about health and disease and what I'm seeing in the science. And as I told you before, I interpret the science myself. I'll go to the literature and I will do my own review. And based upon that review, I will make deductions or decisions about what I think the truth is. And the good news is when it comes to bone broth and trying to do a review on the health benefits of bone broth from a gut health perspective, it doesn't take me very long to do a review. There's not even one study. Not even one. Not even a shitty one. Am I allowed to swear on the line? Am I allowed to do that?
Try not to, but it's all good.
Okay, sorry about that. I apologize to the people who have children at home. There's not even a bad one. How about that? Okay. And here we are, and we see health practitioners. We see some medical doctors claiming that this is the solution to fixing your gut. And it's becoming literally a billion-dollar industry. And all I can say is this. When I see a medical doctor recommending bone broth, I no longer care what their opinion is. I really don't. Because they've already demonstrated, there is not a single study. Show me the study.
Okay.
And if you don't have a study to back up your recommendations as a medical doctor, then what kind of medical doctor are you? Because you're not using science. So With regard to, bone broth and these assertions, it's not there. The data is not there. And we could talk more about the recent paleo study that came out that looked at people who follow a paleo diet and the effect that it has on the microbiome. It's a fascinating study. It's very interesting. We can talk about it. There's some things in the details in that study that are really cool.
Dr. B, I think it'd be fascinating to talk about that. Let's get there, but we have a small program interruption to check on your Instagram following. We've gotten to, I can see 49.8, but you can see more details. I'm hoping we are close to 49.9. If you're new to the webinar, you just tuned in, we're looking to get Dr. B to 50K followers on Instagram tonight, and we need you to help with that. He's asked you to download the app. He's asked you to follow him tonight and even unfollow him tomorrow. That's okay. We are looking to get to 50K tonight. I'm posting on my IG story right now, Dr. B, telling people to go follow you. We got to make this happen. Where are we at?
Well, I don't want to disappoint you. I don't want you to be mad.
Have you gone down?
No. That would be pretty bad. That would be pretty bad if that happened.
Live on television.
I am at 49.803.
Oh, 3. Ouch. Ouch. Guys, we got this. If you don't. All right, sorry. Let's continue.
No. This is all very. I mean, my head is spinning right now, Dr. B. It's spinning. There's too many things to talk about. Okay.
All right. Can we talk about plant-based nutrition and gut health, though? Can we dive in? That's where there's science.
Yes. Okay. So I'm just going to ask you a question that you can answer at any point in the webinar. I don't really care. I would like to know more about short chain fatty acids and their role in not only repairing gut function, but also in their role in improving the health of other tissues, your brain, your pancreas, your liver, your kidney, etc. So if you know the answer to that question, go for it at any point. But let's talk about plant-based nutrition and why that seems to be a more evidence-based recommendation.
Right. Well, that is a perfect segue into talking about the health of the health of the microbiome with your diet, because short chain fatty acids are my obsession. I have been studying them for years now, and literally I'm writing a book with the entire point of the book basically being that we in the United States need more short chain fatty acids. So before we get into exactly what short chain fatty acids do, I would start by saying this. Short chain fatty acids, what we're talking about, are 3 specific molecules that are the majority of them: butyrate, acetate, and propionate. And they are derived from complex carbohydrates. Okay, so they are derived from dietary fiber. Not all fiber. Generally, what we're talking about is the soluble fiber, which is the prebiotic. Prebiotic means that it feeds and nourishes the healthy bacteria that live in your gut. So, we've all been trained, or we all learned as kids, that fiber goes in your mouth and it passes through 20 to 25 feet of intestine, and then it shoots like a torpedo out your bottom and all comes out. And that's simply not the truth. That is simply not the truth. Fiber is fuel for your microbiome. Fiber is the energy, that is the nutrition that the healthy microbes that live inside you are starving for. And the reason why I say it that way is because 97% of Americans are not meeting the minimal daily standard of fiber. The minimal daily standard of fiber. And when we do studies where we try to tease out what is the role of fiber in our diet, one of the techniques that is frequently used is that we will basically break people up into quartiles, and we will look at the top 25% of fiber consumers, and we will compare them to the low fiber consumers, which are the people that are really not consuming a lot of fiber. And so when you try to do these kinds of studies, the good news is that finding people who don't consume a lot of fiber is very easy in the United States. You can easily have a low fiber group that's consuming 8 to 10 grams of fiber per day, which is pathetically low. Pathetically low. But the high fiber group is where we have a problem. Because when you do these studies in the United States, what you see is that the high fiber group is not even getting the minimal daily standard of fiber. The high fiber group is not even getting the minimal daily standard of fiber. We have a fiber deficiency in the United States, and we spend all this time talking about protein and protein deficiency, and it almost is non-existent other than in the cancer treatment community or in some of our elderly patients. But we have a prevalent fiber deficiency problem, and fiber is the substrate. It is what is necessary to produce short chain fatty acids. It's fuel for the microbiome. They consume it, and when they consume it, they metabolize it, they transform it, and they release these, I'm going to use the word postbiotic short chain fatty acids. So we keep hearing about prebiotics, probiotics, which are the living organisms that many people will take in a capsule. We hear about prebiotics, which are fiber. We hear about probiotics. But the entire point of prebiotics and probiotics is to produce these postbiotic short chain fatty acids. And that is because they are incredible. They are incredible. They are amazing what they can do. Take the gut. Start just with the gut. Damage to the gut microbiome. Dysbiosis. We've talked about dysbiosis. There are 3 parts to dysbiosis, okay, that I want people at home to know about. Here are the 3 parts of dysbiosis that occur. Step 1, damage to the gut microbiome. Loss of the good guys, more of the bad guys. Loss of balance of the gut microbiota. Step 2, breakdown of the tight junctions that hold the cell walls together. These cells are connected to each other by these tight junctions. It's like a spot weld. When you break them open, you are allowing things to leak out of the intestine. That increased leakiness, we would call that increased intestinal permeability. Some people on the internet will call it leaky gut, and we're basically talking about the same thing. That's leaky gut, increased intestinal permeability by the breakdown of the tight junctions. And step 3 is the release of bacterial endotoxin. Bacterial endotoxin is, if you want to substitute a word and keep it super simple, it's inflammation. But what's fascinating talking to a diabetes community, particularly a type 2 diabetes community, is that there are studies that exist where you can literally inject bacterial endotoxin and induce insulin resistance. Bacterial endotoxin is directly associated with the development of type 2 diabetes. It's also directly associated with inflammation and inflammatory disorders throughout the entire body, right? So 3 steps in dysbiosis. Number 1, damage to the gut microbiota, less good guys, more bad guys. Step 2, breakdown of the tight junctions. Step 3, release of bacterial endotoxin. What do we see when we get short chain fatty acids like butyrate? We see enrichment of the good guys, more good bacteria, more anti-inflammatory bacteria. We see suppression of the bad guys. There is literally direct suppression of inflammatory bacteria like E. coli or Salmonella. We also see repair of the tight junctions. So these tight junctions that have been busted open, we're fixing them. We're putting that spot weld back together to repair the wall, to break down and stop the increased intestinal permeability, to stop the leaky gut. And the third thing is you see a reduce of this inflammatory toxin, bacterial endotoxin. You see a reduction of bacterial endotoxin. So in the gut, short chain fatty acids heal the gut by correcting the microbiota, by fixing the tight junctions, by reducing the release of bacterial endotoxin. Short chain fatty acids supply 70% of the nutrition that the cells within your colon actually live off of. That is their nutritional source. Short chain fatty acids. You want to feed them, you want a healthy lining to your colon, give them short chain fatty acids. And this is part of the reason why a deficiency of short chain fatty acids has been associated with colon cancer. They actually can directly affect cancer risk. They can reduce the cancer risk. There's a number of different mechanisms that they're able to accomplish that. But the role of short chain fatty acids extends far beyond the wall of the colon. It extends far beyond just the tube. They actually are signaling molecules that are actually critical for health throughout the entire body. They will affect everything all the way from your colon, all the way up. They cross the blood-brain barrier, and they can get into your brain, and they can affect the development of disease there. Let me give you an example. We have preliminary data that suggests that short-chain fatty acids can reduce the beta amyloid plaques that have been associated with Alzheimer's disease. Do you know how desperately the drug companies would love to provide us with a drug that can reduce beta amyloid plaques? Do you know how desperately they would want to do that? They would make billions of dollars. And we're sitting there and waiting for this drug to come out. And meanwhile, all we have to do is consume fiber. Like literally, that's all you have to do is consume fiber. And with your microbiome, it will produce short chain fatty acids that will cross the blood-brain barrier and protect you. But in the US, 97% of us are not getting the minimal standard of fiber that we need. Let's talk about the immune system. 70% of the immune system lives within your gut, right there. Right there. Literally one single layer of cells, the epithelial layer, separates 70% of your immune system on one side, your gut microbiota on the other side. They are in constant communication with each other. And short chain fatty acids are one of the ways that your gut microbiota are able to communicate to your immune system. And what's fascinating is you see this explosion of autoimmune disease, right? So celiac disease has increased 500%. Type 1 diabetes is going through the roof. Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis. Today, I saw 9 patients. 2 of the 9 patients that I saw, I diagnosed with microscopic colitis. Microscopic colitis is not ulcerative colitis, it's different. But it is an autoimmune form of colitis, which causes explosive, life-altering diarrhea to the point that like people don't want to go out anymore. And they're waking up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. This is an autoimmune condition that is dramatically on the rise. Dramatically on the rise. And so what we're seeing is the immune system is haywire. It's completely confused. And short chain fatty acids communicate to the immune system, and through a specific immune cell called the T regulatory cell is able to basically cool off the immune system so that it can do its job appropriately. We want an immune system that's not going to react to our own body. That's autoimmune. We want an immune system that's not going to overreact to outside influence that is completely benign, right? That's an allergy. When our immune system reacts to things that are from the outside and overreacts, that's an allergy. We want our immune system just right. We want it just right. We want it fighting disease. We want it destroying cancerous or precancerous cells. And in order to have that, we need the proper balance and communication with our immune system with these short chain fatty acids. I could go on and on. Short chain fatty acids have been associated with protection from obesity, protection from heart disease, coronary artery disease. They affect our cholesterol. But this is a diabetes webinar. So let's talk about short chain fatty acids because they have a direct effect on insulin sensitivity. And that is because they work through 2 specific receptors, G protein coupled receptors 41 and 43, GPR 41 and 43. Butyrate communicates with GPR 41 and 43. And that affects the way that our body is able to balance blood sugar. And one of the ways that this works is with the incretins, GLP-1. I don't know if there are people who take Victoza that are listening right now, but Victoza is a GLP-1 agonist. And so you can take Victoza, but it has a lot of side effects. Or what we can do is try to augment our GLP-1 naturally. And the way that we do that is with fiber. Fiber consumed by our microbes releases postbiotic short chain fatty acids, which basically can affect this entire hormonal balance that exists within the body. So, I could go on and on. Sometimes when I think about the science with regard to short chain fatty acids, it's like too good to be true. It really kind of feels that way. Like, I don't want to sit here as a scientist and make it sound like there's a silver bullet, because that sounds like you're trying to sell a book. But the reality is it's legit. It's like completely legit. And the problem is that we are not actually consuming fiber. And when I say that, I don't mean taking a fiber supplement. I don't mean even specifically grams of fiber. What I'm talking about is maximizing the diversity of plants in our diet. That's what we really need to do.
Okay, Will, can you go back to this idea of bacterial endotoxin production? Because I think this is fascinating. You said there's 3 steps. Number 1, damage. Reduce the diversity of your microbiome. Number 2, break the tight junctions that then causes microscopic tunnels that then increases your gut permeability. Number 3, correct me if I'm wrong, the production of endotoxins from bacteria that then go through those channels and directly into your blood. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, well, these bacterial endotoxins are being produced by gram-negative bacteria, what we would describe as pathogenic bacteria. And we all have them. Every single one of us has E. coli living within our colon. Every single one of us. We hear these stories about E. coli food poisoning. But the issue is that E. coli cannot hurt you when your gut microbiome is healthy, because the good guys crowd out the bad guys. It's like our society. Right? So if you live in a safe place, the reason why that place is safe is because you have a police force and you have basically neighborhood watch, and you have all of these things, these checks and balances in place, so that the bad guys, when they do show up, we get them arrested and we throw them in jail, and that's the end of that deal, right? And the same is true in the gut. The good guys outnumber the bad guys, and they suppress the bad guys. We get into trouble when we allow the bad guys to have a more dominant influence within that balance. And that's what we're talking about, where there's damage to the microbiota, less good guys, more bad guys. The bad guys that we're referring to, I mean, obviously I'm making this as simple as I can. There's individual species that we're talking about. It's highly complicated, but the bad guys are the ones that produce bacterial endotoxin.
Okay, so
what I was going to say is, if you have an intact colon and you don't have that increased intestinal permeability, it goes nowhere. It doesn't do anything. Right? So there's always going to be the production of bacterial endotoxin. You literally can't make it zero. But the point is the tight junctions and intestinal permeability, it's like the floodgate. How much are we going to let through?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So when we repair the gut and you basically close it off with these tight junctions, then you reduce your bacterial endotoxin naturally, because it just doesn't come out.
Got it. So in that sense, the bacterial endotoxins are going to be produced inside of your large intestine. They're going to get flushed into the toilet under normal circumstances when the gut permeability is low. But when your gut permeability is high, then those bacterial endotoxins end up escaping into your blood where they don't belong.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too, Cyrus, to think about is you train your gut one way or the other. The food that you eat trains your gut to be really good at whatever it is that you normally eat. And that's really relevant on 2 levels. Number 1, that's why you have taste buds. Because we have learned, I mean, it's crazy to think about, but there's actually ways that the bacteria that live in our colon, are able to signal throughout our body to basically give us that impulse to eat this or eat that. Hey, I have a sugar craving. I want that sugar, right? And they are putting their survival, because they need that sugar, above our survival. So they can control our taste buds. They can control our impulses in terms of the types of food that we consume. But it's also very important, because the food that you eat routinely will ultimately train your gut to be really good at whatever it is that you're throwing down there, right? So let me give you 2 examples. If you routinely consume fiber, if you routinely consume a diversity of plants, you will have a gut microbiome that is really good at extracting short-chain fatty acids out of that diet. Gram for gram, you will get more short-chain fatty acids out of that fiber. The gut that is built for the production of short-chain fatty acids will produce more short-chain fatty acids from the exact same meal as the person who does not have a gut built to do that. You got to train your gut. Flip side, you consume a diet that's heavy in animal products. All right. Specifically red meat, which contains carnitine and choline. The consumption of carnitine and choline from dietary red meat has been associated with the development of bacteria that produce a molecule from the carnitine called TMA. TMA gets into the bloodstream, travels to the liver. The liver converts it to TMAO. There are studies being done at the Cleveland Clinic. Their cardiology division is arguably the best cardiology division in the entire country. It's clearly one of the top. And they are studying TMAO. And this is not just association, despite the people who desperately would love to see this go away. This is real. TMAO, increased TMAO, has been associated with coronary artery disease, increased risk of death from coronary artery disease, increased risk of death from any cause, not just coronary artery disease. It's been associated with increased risk of stroke,
I think it's
increased risk of chronic kidney disease, increased risk of diabetes, increased risk of peripheral vascular disease, increased risk of congestive heart failure, increased risk of atrial fibrillation. All of these things. I just listed 5 of the top 10 causes of death in the United States, and then a couple more have been associated with TMAO. And they have studies to show us that it's causation, that if you inject TMAO, you increase clotting. So the point, from my perspective, is that if you train your gut with red meat, you will have a gut designed to produce TMAO. And that is a scary thing. And there's this fascinating study that was done where they took, can a person who does not consume red meat produce TMAO? And they did this study actually several years ago. And they convinced a vegan, someone who had been vegan for more than 5 years, to actually eat a steak. And they compared that to someone who was an omnivore who was routinely consuming steak. The woman who was the omnivore ate the steak. Her TMAO was high when it started, but over just 24 hours, it went up 600%, skyrocketed in 24 hours. The vegan, they gave the exact same size steak, the exact same cut, all that, same amount. And the vegan started with a TMAO of essentially 0, and 24 hours later, still had a TMAO of 0. Because they do not have the gut microbiota necessary to take red meat and produce this TMA, the TMA that goes on to the liver to produce TMAO. It's not possible because they don't eat that food. So their gut is not prepared to produce TMAO. Now, can you train your gut to produce TMAO? Can you take a population of vegans and start feeding them this food? Yes. And within about 28 days of consuming regularly this type of food, people will have dramatically increased levels of TMAO because you train your gut. So the point from my perspective is you can train your gut to be really good at producing anti-inflammatory compounds like short-chain fatty acids. And the way that you do that is by maximizing the plants in your diet, by maximizing plant-based diversity. Or the flip side is you can make your gut really, really good at dealing with saturated fat and carnitine and some of these different things that create problems, that create, unhealthy bioactive molecules like TMAO.
Okay, Dr. B, this information is mind-blowing. The audience is loving it. We have a woman saying it's 4 a.m. in Kuwait, and I'm so glad I stayed awake for this.
Oh my gosh, I love you.
We have a lot of great questions coming in, and we definitely want to do that. and answer these questions and take some time to call some people. We said we would call people, so let's do at least 1 or 2 calls. So if you want us to call you and you can ask Dr. B a question, put your phone number in the chat box and we will call you.
I'm so excited about calls. By the way, Nadia is asking, can a carnitine supplement do it? And the answer is yes. I would not take a carnitine supplement.
There you go. Okay, also, before we get to doing some phone calls and whatnot, so put your phone numbers in there. I want to tell everybody, look, if you want to learn how to increase your fiber consumption, you want to learn how to make sure that you are filling up on healthy foods, we have a program to help you with that. We just recently launched it. It's called the DIY program, Do It Yourself. It's our most inexpensive program we've had, and I just put a little box up on the screen so you can check that out and go learn more. If you have any questions, you can put it in the chat box. But one question that's come in several times, Dr. B, is how much fiber should people consume?
That is a great question. So let me say this. When we introduce fiber, we need to start low and go slow. All right. So there is such a thing as too much too fast. So we need to train our gut. It's like, I think about it like exercise. Okay. So I went to the gym earlier tonight. If I go to the gym and I take twice as much weight as I normally lift, what's going to happen? I'm going to hurt myself, right? If I try to lift twice as much the weight that I normally lift, I'm going to hurt myself. I have strategically chosen the right amount of weight to challenge myself, to make myself stronger without crossing that line to the point that I actually hurt myself. And that's true with fiber too. When you exercise your gut, you introduce fiber in a way where you start low, you go slow, you ramp it up over the course of time. And this may be, particularly for someone who has dysbiosis or damage to their gut microbiome, this may take a long time. It's not necessarily going to be a 2-week thing. This may take months to really do that. All right. Ideal fiber, to me, is not about the grams. The grams will come with the consumption of a predominantly plant-based diet. You will get the fiber that you need in order to hit your mark in terms of grams of fiber. If you look at these native tribal people, the Hadza that we were talking about in Tanzania, they consume 100 to 150 grams of fiber per day. This is why I'm saying they're gatherers more than hunters. They're eating 100 to 150 grams of fiber per day. I just told you most people in the United States aren't even above 20. Not even above 20. All right. We need to get it up, but it's going to come with a predominantly plant-based diet. But the key is this. This is not about taking a fiber supplement and just like trying to crank up your fiber supplements, your fiber levels with a supplement. That's not the solution. The solution is in diversity of plants. All right. Every single plant, specifically from a categorical basis, every single plant is going to have its own unique mix of microbes that are going to thrive with the consumption of that and release the fiber the way that we want it to be. So, and this is the thing when I was talking before about the paleo diet, looking at the paleo diet and the gut microbiome. What was fascinating about this study is that they found higher TMAO levels. So they were looking at TMAO levels and they were comparing just like a standard diet, pretty healthy diet in Australia, not vegan at all. Standard healthy diet to someone who is pseudo paleo, meaning they kind of follow the rules of paleo, but they're not super strict about it. And then the third category was strict paleo, meaning like you are not consuming grains. You are flat out not consuming grains at all. And what they found, what that was interesting, is when they compared the two types of paleo groups, strict paleo and pseudo paleo, they consumed basically the same amount of red meat. Okay? The same amount of red meat. No difference. Yet the strict paleo group had a substantially higher TMAO level. Why is that? Shouldn't the fiber in our diet protect us from this TMAO? And the answer in this study was no, because the strict paleo group was consuming more fiber than the pseudo paleo group, and yet had a higher TMAO. Okay, so the strict paleo group is consuming more fiber, the same amount of red meat, yet has a higher TMAO. What is it? What's the deal? And here's what they found. Absolutely fascinating. It's the elimination of whole grains. The category of whole grains led to an increase in one specific bacteria called Hungatella. Hungatella produces TMA. So even though they had the same amount of red meat consumption as the pseudo-paleo group, they were producing more TMAO because by eliminating whole grains, it altered their microbiome. So the point from my perspective is that it's about diversity of plants. You want a simple rule from tonight's webinar. You want to me, the key to gut health, the key to gut health. Diversity of plants, diversity of plants, diversity of plants. You go in the supermarket, diversity of plants. You're sitting down at dinner, diversity of plants. You're at the salad bar, you're trying to figure out what to put on your salad, diversity of plants. This is the key to gut health.
Super simple. I love it, Dr. B. We have Deborah on the line. Deborah, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. And Dr. B is ready for you.
Oh, thank you so much. This is so wonderful. I'm an OBGYN in California, and I'm actually calling on behalf of my sister who's also listening. She had an esophagectomy, and they had to cut for cancer, and they had to cut the vagus nerve and bring her stomach up to be an esophagus for her, and they call it a conduit. And we were just wondering, because her doctor knows nothing about the gut-brain axis or the brain-gut axis, and I wanted to know how this vagotomy would affect her emotional state. And you're saying there's no problem with B12, with having enough intrinsic factor, and I just feel like her doctors don't know enough, and so I'm asking on her behalf. What do you think about the gut-brain axis, the brain-gut axis, after a vagotomy for cancer?
So this is a great question, and Deborah, great to talk to you as a fellow OBGYN. You clearly have a higher level of understanding of some of these concepts. So I just want to start by breaking this down for the people who are listening at home so that they kind of understand in more detail what we're talking about here. So your sister has had esophageal cancer, and as in having that esophageal cancer, they had to do a really large, complex, dangerous surgery, an esophagectomy. And when they do this, they're removing most of the esophagus, which connects from your throat right here all the way down to the bottom of your sternum, right here at the top of your abdomen and your top. And so then when they do that, they will take the stomach and they'll actually pull it up and connect it to the esophagus right up here at the top. And in the process of doing this, they cut a major nerve called the vagus nerve. Okay, so the vagus nerve is really important for people to know about, because the vagus nerve is essentially the superphone that connects our gut to our brain. This is a direct phone line, and there is information that is being collected from the gut. There are literally millions of nerves that are inside of your gut, more nerves than any other part in of your body except for your brain. So the second most nerves in the entire body are there carpeting your gut, and all that information, a tremendous amount of information, is being basically absorbed, and it's then connected and sent to the brain using the vagus nerve. So this is one of the major ways that the gut communicates with our brain. But here's the key for your sister. We can't change the fact that the vagus nerve has been cut. There's nothing that we can do to take that back. It is what it is. And it's a part of the process that had to unfold in the setting of having this esophageal cancer with this large surgery. But what we can control to the best of our ability is our microbiome, because our microbiome has ways to communicate with our brain that are not just the vagus nerve. There are many different ways that the gut is able to communicate to our brain. One of them is the short-chain fatty acids that we've been talking about. Again, short-chain fatty acids cross the blood-brain barrier and can have an effect in the brain. So there's more to it than just that. They're neurotransmitters. Let's talk about serotonin. So serotonin is the happy hormone. it controls our mood, right? If I'm in a great mood, it's because I've optimized serotonin levels. It affects our energy levels. If I want to treat someone who suffers from anxiety or depression, I can give them a serotonin reuptake inhibitor like Zoloft. You guys have heard of these types of things. They increase serotonin levels in the body. Would you know 90% of serotonin is produced in the gut? 90% of serotonin is produced in the gut. 50% of dopamine is produced in the gut. There are over 30 neurotransmitters produced in the gut. And so our gut is deeply intertwined with this. Why is serotonin produced in the gut? Why is it mostly there and not up here? The reason why is because serotonin also helps to affect gut motility. So our gut produces serotonin to basically establish our rhythm. And when we damage the gut and we throw off our serotonin levels, we see altered gut motility, right? That could be diarrhea, that could be constipation, but we see altered gut motility. And the other thing that we see is increase in anxiety, depression, neuroticism. And what I just described to you is irritable bowel syndrome. Damage to the gut microbiome, dysbiosis, causes alteration of gut motility, causes an increase in sensitivity of the gut with pain, and can frequently affect mood. That is irritable bowel syndrome, and the root cause is damage to the gut microbiome. With your sister, my point is this. We can't reverse the vagotomy. What we can do is do what is within our power to try to optimize her gut microbiome, which, by the way, may be relevant in the fight against cancer. I don't know where she stands with that. But so optimizing our gut microbiome will allow us to produce these signaling molecules. Short chain fatty acids are one of them. 5-HT, which is a serotonin precursor, is another one that crosses the blood-brain barrier. And so that's, I think, from my perspective with your sister, that's what I would focus on, is trying to optimize the gut microbiome with the intent of establishing to the best of our ability that connection between the gut and the brain.
Deborah, I hope that was helpful.
Thank you so much. Yes, exactly what I thought. Thank you so much. And she was on the line, so that's great. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very
for the
much.
call.
Yeah, thanks for calling, and have a great night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. B, people are loving this. The crowd is just cheering right now in the chat box.
I love you too.
We had a woman say, let's see. She says, this is the best use of a Thursday night in years.
Hey, Kathleen, 518. I'm from Burnt Hills.
All right,
let's say New York. Cat 518 area code is Albany, New York. That's
Cyrus, why don't you fire off one of these questions on our spreadsheet, and I'll get the next person on the line.
All right. Here we go. I'd love to hear you touch on SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and how to address it. How to address it. Period, and how does it relate to type 2 diabetes at all?
So let me say this. When we talk about SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth, I want people to understand that that generic recommendations aren't going to work. All right, generic recommendations, me saying do this, do that, that's not the way it works. For me to work on SIBO, I need people in my clinic with me, and I'm doing a full detailed evaluation, and then providing a completely customized treatment plan. Okay, but what is SIBO? This may be something that your listeners are already very familiar with. SIBO is an overgrowth of bacteria within the small intestine. We know that when the body is functioning the way that it's supposed to, there really aren't supposed to be many bacteria there. They're supposed to be predominantly in the colon. And so when we see this overgrowth of bacteria within the intestine, it can create issues. They can start to ferment the food that we consume, producing gas, producing alteration of our bowels, potentially diarrhea, many times abdominal pain. Now, there are tests that exist for SIBO. So if you have not been tested for SIBO, yet you have been told that you have SIBO, I can't say that you don't, but you need to be tested. You need to be tested. And I see far too often that people are told that they have SIBO without even being tested. That is not good care.
Let me catch you up. What's the definitive test for determining whether or not you have SIBO? Is it a methane?
Oh, gosh, man. Your listeners who are here tonight deserve to hear this but this is a complicated topic.
Yeah.
All right. The gold standard test which, as you're aware, the gold standard is meant to be the test by which all other tests in the disease are compared. It's the best that you got, right? The gold standard diagnosis is jejunal aspirate, so going into the small intestine beyond the duodenum. All right, so you go through the stomach, through the duodenum to the jejunum, you suck up some fluid, and you culture it. And the results that you get on that culture are the gold standard for the diagnosis of SIBO. Now, how many times have I seen a doctor do that? None. People don't do it. All right. People do not do the gold standard test. What they substitute, if they do a test at all, I see, again, far too many people not getting tested and told that they have this. The test that is substituted is a breath test. There's different types of breath tests that exist for SIBO. The problem is that all of them are flawed. They don't align well with the gold standard test. And to make it even more complicated, before I even continue down this path, let me say this. I want to take a step back. SIBO has been hyped up. SIBO is being talked about like everywhere. And we're trying to figure it out. And sometimes the hype, in a lot of cases, gets out in front of the actual science. And the scientific community needs more time to really learn to understand what we're dealing with, because it's not as straightforward as people want to make it seem. It's not. It's very complicated. There was a study that was published in Nature that just came out in May of this year, completely throwing cold water on even the gold standard test. In this study, they did a microbiome analysis from the small intestine, and they compared it to the culture results. Again, the culture result is the gold standard. And what they showed is that by analyzing the microbiome of the small intestine, there is an overdiagnosis or false positive rate to the gold standard in people that have no symptoms at all. They have no symptoms, but they would be diagnosed with SIBO. And those tend to be high fiber consumers. That's not SIBO. And in that same study, they showed that there is a miss rate of people who are not diagnosed with SIBO by the gold standard test, yet have dysbiosis or damage to their small bowel microbiome, and they're symptomatic. So the point from my perspective is that the testing is not great. All right. When it comes to SIBO, many people who have diabetes may have SIBO. That is one of the clear-cut risk factors for small intestine bacterial overgrowth. If you prove to have SIBO, the treatment can be somewhat complicated. In some cases, antibiotics are necessary to basically suppress the bacteria, but then you ultimately have to build the gut back up. The challenge is that what I view as the solution, which is fiber, a plant-based diet. The challenge is that the people who need that diet the most, I've already told you, fiber reorients the balance of the gut bacteria. Fiber corrects tight junctions and fixes them. Fiber reduces the release of bacterial endotoxin. Fiber fixes dysbiosis. Flat out. But the problem is that the person who has damage to their gut microbiome, whether it be SIBO or irritable bowel, the person who needs fiber the most is the person who is going to also struggle the most to get the fiber on board. And that's because they have damage to their gut microbiome. They struggle with fiber. The people who need it the most are the ones who struggle the most in the very beginning. And they're also the ones who benefit the most as they work through that process and ultimately heal their gut. So the SIBO topic is a very, very complicated topic. The other thing that people need to know is that you would not believe how frequently I see people who are diagnosed with SIBO and I find that they're constipated. It's not SIBO. That's constipation. And when you correct the constipation, which is the number one cause of gas and bloating in my clinic, when you correct the constipation and you restore a healthy rhythm where they're having regular bowel movements, those people are fixed. They're completely better. And that's when they're able to start ramping up their fiber consumption. So in my clinic, when I have a person who I think is constipated, I actually don't make dietary changes until I correct the constipation.
Excellent. Excellent stuff. Okay. We could go in a million directions here, Dr. B. So much great stuff. But I have Kathleen on the line here. Can you hear us, Kathleen?
I can.
Okay, great. Dr. B's ready for you.
Hi, Dr. B. So 3 years ago, I had a total pancreatectomy with auto-islet transplant to prevent pancreatic cancer from a genetic pancreatitis issue. And since then, I've been on pentazocol, and I've had to increase it to 50 milligrams a day. And I know it has a lot of issues in terms of bone density and other issues, and I'm worried about continuing to take that. But if I don't take it, I have a lot of gut issues. In terms of my surgery, that's really the only side effect I have. I know I'm a really lucky person who's had this surgery to not have any other issues coming out of it. I haven't met anyone else like me, but I'm curious about that, and if this plant-based diet can help with that and get me off of pentazocol and kind of calm things down.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you're doing well. First of all, that is a rather complicated topic because, obviously when we talk about healing the gut in this particular unique setting that you're describing, that we're not going to have studies to guide us on something that is so specific and not frequently encountered. But I think the point from my perspective is this: if you take a step back and you look at optimal digestive function, you look at things like, for example, acid reflux, right? So people who have acid reflux, we can treat them with these medicines that you're talking about, proton pump inhibitors, and we can reduce the stomach acid, and they may experience some relief from that acid reflux. But are we missing on the big opportunity? What is driving acid reflux? Is it obesity in this country? I see thin people every single day in my clinic suffering with acid reflux. It's hard for me to buy that it's all obesity driven when I see thin people with reflux. And what we've seen in recent studies that have come out in the last few years, two things. Number one, fiber fixes acid reflux. Number two, a plant-based or plant-centered diet improves acid reflux. So when we talk about optimizing digestive function, optimizing gut motility, that's really what you're talking about when it comes to this specific issue. In a perfect world, I would love to get you off of that medicine. Clearly, given the circumstances that we're dealing with, there may be a necessity for some medicine. I would not create arbitrary rules of, that's not necessarily a good idea. Instead, what we do is we optimize and control what we do have the ability to optimize and control. And in that process, recognizing that it's not going to be a quick fix, recognizing that this may take months to years, we are optimizing your body. We are getting your gut working the way that it's supposed to. We are optimizing motility. We are reducing visceral hypersensitivity. And ultimately, we are putting you in the best position for us to reduce that medicine to the lowest dose necessary to control your symptoms. And that's ultimately where we want this to go. There is a risk to all choices in healthcare. I know you understand that there's a risk and a benefit to every single choice that we make in healthcare. And what we want to do is we want to optimize that risk-benefit ratio in your favor.
Hope that's helpful.
It is very much so.
Excellent. Thanks for calling.
Thank you.
Dr.
Thanks
B,
for calling.
Absolutely.
How'd you get so smart? I don't understand. I'm sitting here trying to understand half the words coming out of your mouth. How did you do it?
I dreamed of being like you someday, for the longest time.
Well, you're doing a good job, let me tell you.
Okay, so we have so many questions, guys. I don't know if we're going to be able to get through all of them. We might have to do another webinar or an article or a podcast or something. This is fantastic. So, Cyrus, why don't you pick one more question? I'll do one more phone call.
Okay, here we
go. I love the phone calls. I love these phone calls. It's so fun.
Good.
Okay.
Can I say one quick thing?
Yeah.
So let's talk about the proton pump inhibitors. I am not an apologist for proton pump inhibitors. I don't love them. I would, in a perfect world, I would get my patients off of these medicines. But there is a place. There is a place for these medicines. And just to reassure our caller, the bone density thing, there are some things that are clearly real with the proton pump inhibitors. I definitely think that they affect our gut microbiome. There's no question about that. But there is good news when it comes to the bone density thing. From my perspective, if proton pump inhibitors affect bone density, I don't think that they dramatically affect bone density. They may affect it, but if they do, it is not a dramatic effect. How do I know that? Because we have been studying this question for 15 years. We have been studying this question, and there have been massive studies using national databases, using hundreds of thousands of patients worth of information to try to figure out whether or not proton pump inhibitors affect bone density. And after all of those studies, the answer to the question is, I'm not really sure. And so what can I take away from that? Actually, there's some really helpful information that I can take away from that. And that's this. When we're trying to study an effect, whatever it may be, when we're trying to study an effect, if the effect is real, you will find it. And what I mean by that is there is no randomized controlled study to tell us that smoking causes lung cancer. That does not exist. That was epidemiology that allowed us to deduce that. But that association is so powerful that once we started to study it, it became clear. If you study something and study something and study something, and you spend millions of dollars trying to figure out whether or not proton pump inhibitors cause loss of bone density, and you still are not sure, then to me, what that says is maybe they do, but if they do, it's not that powerful an effect. There's other things that I worry about with those medicines. I don't want you on them. But we also need to accept that there is a place for these medicines at the lowest necessary dose to achieve the effect that we're trying to.
I was actually going to launch into a question about what do you call these guys? I'm blanking on the name here. A fecal transplant. That may be a whole tangent that could take hours to talk about. Robbie, do you want to go into a call, or do you want to go into the fecal transplant, that side of things? You tell me.
Let's go into it. I know this is a fascinating one.
Okay, so the question is, people who are suffering from severe dysbiosis, sometimes eating a fiber-rich diet, like you're saying, can take a long time. The people that need it the most are the people that actually get the most, they suffer the most at the very beginning. Talk to us about fecal transplants. Is that an option for people? Is it clinically available to people right now? And why do they seem to be a very promising solution?
Fecal transplants are a promising solution, but we have to allow the studies to unfold so that we know exactly what we're doing, what the risks are, what the benefits are, and whether once we have that, that risk-benefit ratio, then we can make informed choices about whether or not we want to actually subject ourselves to it. So let me take a step back and say this. There is a particular bacteria called Clostridium difficile, C. diff. All right. Now, I'm going to tell the listeners at home, a little story about C. diff. When I was in med school in the early 2000s, it existed. Like, we saw it. It existed. I saw it at Georgetown University Hospital. But we only saw it basically in the hospital, typically elderly women that were on antibiotics. Now, we did not understand what was going on at the time. But now in hindsight, we get that many of us actually carry this bacteria, C. diff. Like, I may have it right now inside of me, all right? But there's a reason why it's not creating havoc. And that is that I have healthy microbes suppressing this bad bacteria. But when you give someone an antibiotic and you wipe out the good guys, right? And antibiotics kill, that's not true. Antibiotics kill bacteria, good guys and bad guys. It's dropping napalm on the gut. So when you give someone antibiotics, you wipe out all these bacteria. But if you don't hurt the C. diff, which most of our antibiotics do not, then the C. diff can basically thrive and take over in that power vacuum that you just created by wiping out all of these different bacteria. So that's what was happening in the early 2000s. But again, we only saw it in the hospital. And back then, let me say this real quick. C. diff causes colitis. It causes inflammation of the colon. This is not ulcerative colitis. It's a different condition. This is an infectious colitis, inflammation of the colon, explosive, profuse diarrhea, a lot of times blood, fever, and people can get really sick, to the point that it can be life-threatening, to the point that it can require people to actually have their colon removed. I have sent people in my career to have their colon removed because of C. diff. I have seen people die of C. diff during my career. So, but here's the fascinating part. What I learned in med school, what I saw in Georgetown University Hospital of elderly women in the hospital on antibiotics was rapidly outdated within just a few years. Everything that I learned about this bacteria was rapidly outdated within a few years. By around 2010, we were seeing it in young people, not in the hospital, not on antibiotics, literally just coming in. What we did not understand is that these people, what happened is they had dysbiosis. They had damage to their gut microbiome to the point that they could not suppress the bacteria anymore. So the bacteria was taking over. We struggled to control the bacteria. We could not get it under control with antibiotics. Failure after failure. I had patients literally that I would treat for months on end with antibiotics to suppress the bacteria, because if I took them off the antibiotic, the C. diff came back. All right, we were desperate. So what did we do? In times of desperation, you do desperate things. We as a medical community turned in a direction that no one ever thought that we would, that most of us thought was disgusting. We started doing fecal transplant. And what that means is we took literally the poop. I am not like, if you're eating food, put your food down and stop eating it right now. Mm-hmm. I am not exaggerating when I say that when I was a GI fellow, I did a ton of fecal transplants. I had a Vitamix blender, and someone would bring in a poop. I would put the poop in and blend it up into a smoothie. And that's how we did our fecal transplants back then. Literally blending up poop. Okay.
So you take that blended up poop, and then what do? You actually insert it into.
There's a number of ways. Yeah. There's a number of ways you can do it. One of the main way, which I think is typically the best way, is to do a colonoscopy. And you go in during the colonoscopy, and then you will inject it through the colonoscope into the person's small intestine and their colon. So that's the way that we used to do it. That's the way that we still do it. So, but the point is, what's fascinating is these people who would be on antibiotics, life-threatening C. diff infection, could not get them off antibiotics. You do a fecal transplant, and in like 2 days, I mean, the studies would say 90%. I'm telling you, it's more than 90%. Virtually everyone is cured. And the reason why is because you're basically giving them a new microbiome, and you're reestablishing the healthy bacteria and the balance that you need to suppress the C. diff. The minute you do that, the C. diff is like the Wicked Witch of the West getting water splashed on her. She's just like, it's like, I'm melting, and it just disappears and goes away because you have established order in your gut microbiome. So fecal transplant in that setting is amazing and life-saving and complete game changer. But fecal transplant is only FDA approved right now for that one specific indication. Your doctor is not legally allowed to administer a fecal transplant for any indication other than what I just described, unless you are participating in a study and have signed waivers and been appropriately counseled about the risks. Part of the reason that we're being very cautious, it's like, oh, why don't we just do this for everything? Why don't we do this for every single dysbiosis state that exists and see what happens? The reason why is because when we started doing blood transfusions in the 1970s, we saved a lot of lives. We also killed a lot of people by giving them HIV and hepatitis C. And we had no clue that we were giving them these infections. And so the point from our perspective as the scientific community is that we want to learn about fecal transplant and make sure that we are able to provide an informed risk-benefit analysis before we start giving it to people. Some of the studies that are being done out there looking at people with dysbiosis, for example, irritable bowel syndrome, some of them are not looking that good, honestly. So it may sound intuitive, oh, just give me a new microbiome with fecal transplant. It's not necessarily going to work for everything, but I will tell you that I'm very optimistic that this could work. This could work for diabetes. But here's the issue. There was a study, again, it comes back to your microbiome is determined by the food that you eat. That is the number one determinant. So there was a study where they took young men who went through diabetes, and they gave them a fecal transplant from a lean control, a lean, healthy control that did not have insulin resistance. And it was fascinating because this is a human study. And many times these human studies don't give us the results that we see in the animal studies. But in this study of young men with insulin resistance, they saw improvement. They saw improvement of their insulin resistance and their markers of their disease, their type 2 diabetes. The problem is that it only lasted for a few weeks and then it tapered off. And the reason why it only lasts for a few weeks and it tapers off is that if you don't change your diet, then you don't have the diet to support the microbiome that you just received. You got the microbiome of someone that eats specific food, and if you don't eat the same diet that they were just eating, you're just going to lose the bacteria that you received and go back to whatever it is that you had before because you're eating the same food that you ate before.
Okay, Dr. B, Cindy hopes that you have a new Vitamix.
I don't know what happened to that Vitamix. We have a new way that we do fecal transplant now that no longer involves a Vitamix. But yeah, if you ever went to the University of North Carolina and they have some sort of garage sale and they're selling a Vitamix, do not buy it. Even if it's like dirt cheap. I don't care if it's $5. Do not buy that Vitamix.
Okay.
That is the second best advice that I've given tonight. The best advice is diversity of plants.
Yes.
All right. So we have Emily on the line right now. Emily, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Dr. B's ready for you.
Awesome. Hi, Dr. B, and the other doctors also, because I love you guys. I listen to you guys on podcasts everywhere. So thanks for having all this information out for us. So I had a question in regard to, because I myself have endometriosis and polycystic ovarian syndrome, and it took about 2 years to diagnose, but that was because I was just nuts about it. Like, I went to the hospital monthly, like during my monthly, because I knew it was going to come. Like, I knew the pain was going to come and everything. So I was basically just going crazy. Like, I was like, I need to find out what on earth I have. They finally diagnosed me like after 1.5 years or maybe 2. And then I started just like reading up on how to naturally, like fix this on my own, because all they were suggesting is either surgery or birth control pills or I don't know what other crazy stuff. So I finally found out about like having a vegan diet, and it almost turned my life upside down. Like, I mean, it's a whole food plant-based diet. It's not just a vegan diet. And after doing that, I stopped getting the pains almost immediately. My family is Dominican, so they constantly eat meat. So they would just tell me like, oh, that's all in your head. Then I would start eating animal products again, and then the pains would come back. So I just knew like what was right for my body at that point, obviously, because it was like a big alarm system. Whenever I ate something with hormones in it or, antibiotics, my body would just go haywire. So another symptom that I still have till this day, because every other symptom I basically wiped away, is like I sweat a lot. If I accidentally eat like a little bit of refined sugar or fruits at a certain time, and I would just over sweat, and I'm not afraid to say like I would get weird odors, almost metallic, sometimes a little worse. Like, and then if I don't eat refined sugars, I'm fine. Like, because most deodorants, they would give me like lumps, so I stopped wearing them. So if I eat like a good diet where it's like no refined sugar, whole food plant-based, I'm good. But then if I like eat sugar or something processed that like I just have no idea that there was sugar in it, then I would start like getting the night sweats, and then like it's just like a weird symptom that, and no doctor has been able to explain to me. So I don't know if you guys know about it, but then I was reading a lot into insulin resistance, because I would break out whenever I ate anything that was even moderately oily, even if it was coconut oil or like, I mean, that's processed too, but anything with like nuts, even nuts. Like, I can't have more than a handful of nuts, or else I'm going to get cystic acne. So I don't know if you guys could give me any feedback on that, or if you think it's insulin resistance, or how I could measure it, or tell a doctor to measure it, because they're not really helping me out, my primary doctor.
I mean, so let me say there's so much I want to talk about. I think this is great. I first of all applaud you for being your own advocate for the dietary changes that you made. If I had the ability to put you in a chair and lift you up and down in a chair while people dance in circles and sing songs, we would do that because it would be really fun and really cool. All right, so let's start. There's so much I want to talk about. You got my brain going a million miles an hour, but let's start off talking about endometriosis and PCOS. If you were here in the beginning of the webinar, then you heard me say that a patient comes into my office and they're suffering with this and with that and this that are connected to dysbiosis, and I know they have dysbiosis, and I don't need a test to prove that to me because of the different disease states that they've experienced. And what you just listed is included in that, in what I'm talking about. Endometriosis and PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome, both of which have been connected to damage or alteration to the gut microbiome, dysbiosis. And here's what's fascinating is that our gut is, as far as I'm concerned, the largest endocrine organ in the body. What I mean by endocrine is controlling the hormones within our body. That includes insulin. That also includes estrogen. Estrogen, for what you have been describing, is a critical piece. Endometriosis is a state which, for the people listening at home, endometriosis is where endometrial tissue, which typically should be inside of the uterus, can start to appear in different places all over the body, typically in the abdominal cavity, causing pain, discomfort. It will fluctuate with your menstrual cycle. And endometriosis is a state of excessive estrogen. Polycystic ovary syndrome can be, in some cases, a state of inadequate estrogen, but not necessarily. What's more important with polycystic ovary syndrome is that it's a state of excessive androgen production. There's a loss of the hormonal balance, not enough estrogen relative to the amount of androgens. So you could actually be normal or even potentially high on estrogen levels and still develop polycystic ovary syndrome when there is an excess of androgens relative to the estrogen. Now, here's the key. In the gut microbiome, there are bacteria that have an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase. Beta-glucuronidase is a critical player in estrogen balance. I would describe it as the floodgates. We want just the right amount of water flowing downstream. And when our microbiome is healthy, it can regulate our estrogen levels to give us that. But through beta-glucuronidase, which activates estrogen, if things are thrown out of whack, you can see the excessive or the insufficient production of estrogen, which can throw off our hormonal balance. That's one of the things that I worry about with you. This is part of the reason why damage to the gut microbiome is associated with both endometriosis and polycystic ovary syndrome. But there's more. I just said that PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome, is associated with an alteration of the balance between estrogen and androgens. There is a bacteria that exists in the gut called Clostridium scindens. Clostridium scindens is known to produce androgens. This bacteria may be responsible for the excessive production of androgens, which can lead to potentially the manifestation of polycystic ovary syndrome. Everything that you are describing comes back to the gut. It all comes back to the gut. Now, let's talk about PCOS and insulin resistance. Because what's fascinating is that it's the exact same pathogenesis. Polycystic ovary syndrome does include insulin resistance. The other condition that includes insulin resistance is fatty liver disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Okay? Fatty liver, so insulin resistance potentially with type 2 diabetes. It can manifest with fatty liver disease, and you will see insulin resistance in a patient with polycystic ovary syndrome. What is the treatment for all three of these conditions that I just named? PCOS, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and type 2 diabetes. Metformin. Metformin is the treatment for all three of these conditions. Metformin has been available since the 90s. All right, so we're looking at over 20 years of experience with metformin. Predominantly used in type 2 diabetes, but again, has this role, very commonly used in polycystic ovary syndrome. So we've used metformin all these years, and it wasn't until the last 5 years that we discovered that the way that metformin works is by altering your gut microbiome. That's the way that metformin works. That's one of the key ways that metformin is actually able to function. So I think it's a fascinating thing to sort of tie all of this together. Now, if we're going to move outside of talking about PCOS and insulin resistance and talk about the sweating and all of that, it's hard for me to know exactly what to tell you other than two things. Number one, based upon what you're describing, clearly we need to avoid refined grains. That's clear cut, easy, done. It just is not going to work. I'm sorry, refined sugar, I believe is what you said. But the other thing that's kind of interesting is you're talking about our natural odor, right? So I've already told you that our microbiome has a say in terms of the way that we like our taste buds or our food impulses. All right, our microbiome has a say in finding a mate. There are studies that suggest that our microbiome affects our odor. It affects our pheromones. And there are fascinating studies that I did not spend a ton of time reading because they're more sensational than scientifically relevant, but meat sweats. Do they exist? Yes, they actually exist. They actually have done studies where they take the odor of men consuming a high amount of meat, and they allowed women to smell this body odor, and the women were scoring it based upon what they thought and how attracted they were to the body odor. And the lowest score went to the men who were consuming the most meat. Meat sweats are real.
This is fascinating.
And so our microbiome potentially, let me say this. This is getting a little weird, but I just have to say it. Have you ever been on a date? This is a rhetorical question. I'm married. I'm not going on dates, obviously. All right. I'm obsessed with my wife. But have you ever been on a date and just been like, I should like this person. Everything about them is great. Checks all the boxes. But I'm just not feeling the smell. Have you ever been on a date like that before? It happened.
In the chat box, let us know, guys. Emily said yes.
That is potentially the compatibility of our microbiome having a say in our dating and mating practices. And it leads to a follow-up question. We're covering all the topics here tonight, guys. All right, we're covering everything. I'm pulling out all the guns. Why do we kiss? Why do we kiss? Why did we evolve to do that? What's the point?
Sure.
Recent studies have shown us that we are exchanging our microbiome, that a 10-second kiss could literally lead to 10 million microbes being exchanged during that tongue tie. So all these things that you're describing, you asked me for comments, my brain went crazy, and I needed to talk about endometriosis, PCOS, how that's connected to insulin resistance, how that's connected to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, the fact that metformin, which we used for 20 years, did not realize until recently that metformin actually works by affecting your gut microbiome, And finally, that our microbes have say over not only the food that we eat, but also the person that we choose to mate with.
And that meat sweats are real.
And then the meat sweats are real. Which is
Emily, I hope that was helpful.
The most part.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for calling. Have a great.
So, and it's interesting. So we talk about these pheromones, and they've actually shown that the balance of your microbiota can determine what the smell actually is, and that I don't know why this is, but the unhealthy inflammatory microbes, they are the ones that actually promote a smell that people find to be less attractive.
All right, Dr. B, this is officially the most fascinating webinar we've ever done.
I just want to let you know, Dr. B, you actually smell incredible right now. And so I'm not getting any of these meat sweats from you. I think you smell very attractive to me.
It's amazing that my wife gave me a chance, considering the food that I was eating when we first met. There's a reason why she finds me more attractive today than she used to.
Oh my gosh, this is great. Before we go, guys, I want to remind you of two things. Check out that DIY course if you want to learn how to start including more fiber in your diet in a slow manner, exactly as Dr. B described tonight. Dr. B, you'll be happy to know we teach people one meal at a time, and we have we've seen through experience that's what works. Changing slowly, which is totally correlates to what you were saying tonight about adding more fiber in a manageable amount. You don't just go and double your weight at the gym. So that's the DIY program literally walks you through that for transforming your life and reversing insulin resistance. So check it out. It's one of our most affordable program ever. Click that button and get started immediately. We had a lot of people in the chat box saying that they had joined and they're loving it and just getting ready for the next lesson. So check it out.
If you want to remember how to introduce fiber, it's the Beastie Boys. All right. Let it flow. Let yourself glow. Slow and low. That is the tempo. Slow and low. That is the tempo. Okay, people? Beastie Boys.
Okay. One more thing here. Can you give us an update on the Instagram number?
Oh, man, you're not going to be happy.
Oh, don't tell me you went backwards. I refreshed and you're still at 49.8. Because you know how it goes. Sometimes you're at like 49.8 and then you go down to like 7. You just oscillate.
I'm 49.846. We'll probably hit it tomorrow. Probably tomorrow or Saturday.
Okay. I see it coming. All right.
Well, I'm glad that we could have helped contribute to you getting to 50K and severely disappoint you. What's that? We do have the replay, so that's true. People will hopefully follow you over the course of the next 2 or 3 days, and we want credit for it. So
nice.
Dr. B, you're amazing. People are going nuts. There's still 279 people after 2 hours of webinar, which is truly amazing. For those of you that have participated in the Mastering Diabetes Online Summit in any way, shape, or form over the past 3 years, we are going to be having Dr. B on this upcoming 2020 Mastering Diabetes Online Summit. And we're going to go into depth. I'm going to tell this right now. We're going to go into depth about bacterial endotoxins, short-chain fatty acids, and how they interplay with the development and the reversal of insulin resistance. It is a fascinating topic. Nobody has covered this up until this point. Nobody knows it as well as you do. We're going to go into detail about it. I can't wait.
Awesome, man. I'm super excited about it. We got some hilarious people who are with us here tonight. Sorry, I don't mean to just take over the webinar, but I have to do this. We got someone who says microbiome dating app, copywriting that So that's a brilliant idea. Like, why Tinder it when you could show up to your Tinder date and they could smell like meat? You know? Like, why would you not just have a microbiome dating app? It sounds brilliant. I love that.
Brilliant.
Save us a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of heartbreak. Just let the microbiome figure it out.
It's brilliant.
All right. Well, it's so good. Oh my gosh, I could do this all night. I could hang out.
Yeah.
I could do another 10 calls, but I appreciate it. Thank you to everyone who hung out with us. And gosh, we'll just have to keep rolling, guys. I can't wait for your book to come out. I'm super excited about it. We all to talk about that?
What's that?
Yeah. No, we do have a book coming out in February for sure. We've told people about that. We mentioned it. So more details are coming soon, and we're all excited about it. And is there any news on you writing a book, Dr. B?
Funny that you should ask. Yes. Yeah, no, I'm actually in the middle of editing my book right now. I'm telling you, I just can't wait to share this book. I am so excited about it. And listen to the conversation that we've had tonight.
Yeah.
Like I said in the very beginning, that the science is mind blowing, like that I've seen everything. I'm a medical doctor. I've seen it all. This stuff is insane. So no, I cannot wait to share my book with you guys. I think you guys are going to love it.
Awesome.
I want to get a sneak preview. I'm going to say this right now. I'm going to get a sneak preview before that thing goes live. I'm going to devour it. I'm going to eat all the fiber from that book. And I'm going to get the greatest microbiome you've ever seen before.
Bro, I am such a big Cyrus fan that I might literally redact my own name and just put your name on the cover. And just see what happens.
God, I would love to see that.
Oh, God.
What's the title going to be?
It would be the first time. It would be the first time in book writing history that a person does that.
I'm honored. Thank you so much.
It's a good decision.
The book is called Fiber Fueled. Fiber Fueled.
Fiber fueled. I like it. It's catchy.
Yeah, fiber fueled, because that's what our gut should be. Our gut should be fiber fueled. This is the energy source that supports a healthy gut microbiome. It's indisputable. The science is there. We don't have to wait for the science when it comes to this. The science is there. The science is showing us. And the diet that I recommend in this book will still be the right diet for people to do 50 years from now. It is what it is. There's never going to be a time. I'm sure people can understand this after hearing everything we've talked about tonight. There's never going to be a time where you can take a supplement and fix a bad diet in terms of your gut. It's never going to exist. The food that you eat determines your gut microbiome. And the food that you eat, that you guys recommend in the Mastering Diabetes program and that I recommend in my book, Fiber Fueled, is ultimately what determines a healthy gut and helps to protect us from disease.
Perfect.
So yeah, it's funny because I like the confidence that you use when you talk about the gut microbiome and eating higher diversity of plants and eating more fiber to solve a number of gut related issues. I feel like to a certain extent, when you have gotten to a point in your education where you just get it, you understand the simplicity of the solution and you understand it in its entirety, you end up, it's almost like you talk about it in a way that just like conveys confidence in other people. I hear that in your voice, and I think it's really impressive because, I'm not sure that at all points in your career you might have been able to talk about improving gut health with this much confidence. But when I hear you talk, it's very clear that you understand the complexity of the gut microbiome more than practically anybody I've ever heard before, and that you know how to solve complex problems with a very simple, very elegant, and very straightforward solution. It's impressive. I dig it.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you saying that. It doesn't have to, things don't have to be crazy and complicated. We don't need to, we tend to make diet way more complicated than it needs to be. Yet we have all of these studies showing us how simple the solution really can be. It really can be that simple.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty.
All right, Dr. B, we're going to have to get you back to do another webinar to answer a lot of these questions. And obviously, we're going to get you in the summit. And we're going to just try and extract as much information as we possibly can from your brain.
All right. Next time, more calls. All right. More calls. And the person with the 518 area code gets a freaking call. All right. Sorry. I don't mean to be aggressive, but.
Actually, you did talk to that person.
Oh, okay. All right. We're good. We're good.
Yeah. Just clear the air there.
All right. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks, guys. So much fun.
Thanks, my man. Really appreciate it. Talk soon.